I read the book. I had it in front of me. I had no idea what it was trying to tell me. Hello folks, my name is Stephanie Canada. If this is your first time on my channel, yes indeed, that is my last name. If you enjoy vintage, sewing, humor, and some thrifting adventures, all with heavy doses of sarcasm, please do feel free to click that subscribe button now. In today's video, I'm going to be doing something that terrifies me down to the bottom of my soul. Oh yeah, this is a great plan. What I'm going to be doing today is I am going to be sewing a 1930s blouse pattern from a PDF. I've never done this before. No, seriously. I sell real patterns and that's what I work off of when I occasionally sew. I've never honestly done a PDF pattern before. Now back at the beginning of lockdown, my friend over at Revival Design opted to start giving away some free sewing patterns because, well, we were going to have plenty of time on our hands. And there was a big part of me that was like, I'm gonna make this right away. No, that didn't happen. So here we are about 4 months? 3 months? I don't know, it's been a long time later, and it's still been sitting happily on my computer waiting for the day for me to print it off and make it. Well, today, friends, today is that day. Quick side note, folks, this is not a sponsored video. I am doing this all on my own. I have been paid in no way by Revival Designs to share my opinions with you, so everything you're getting from me is 100% my own thoughts and feelings on it. Now remember, friends, this is my first time making a PDF pattern, so take them all with a very large grain of salt. So let's stop hemming and hawing. Yes, I do mean me. Grab our beverage of choice. Today is water, because occasionally I do actually drink that. And let's get started, shall we? Once I opened up the file, I went in to try and figure out how to print this thing off. And after reading the instructions where it says use Adobe Reader, which I don't have, making sure it's 100%, which I would actually have figured out on my own, and then going into the printer queue, realizing, holy crap, this thing is 77 pages long for a blouse. Alright, well, let's get the test page out. Yeah, alright, that's 1 inch. Ugh, goodbye, small forest. I'm sorry. In retrospect, I would have gone in, printed out only the pages that I intended to use, because there's definitely half of those pages that I didn't actually end up needing. So after printing out my small mountain of pattern, how to screw with your camera's white balance, I guess I have to figure out how to put it together. All right, well, let's do this. After attempting to find my regular Scotch tape and being highly unsuccessful, I did actually have to end up just using a crap load of packing tape and tearing it into tiny little strips, which is really easy to store on the edge of your table, I guess. Now once I had all the prep work done, I had to go in and figure out which pages I actually needed to make these pieces. And then I went about putting the daggone thing together, which we're gonna speed up here for you. And as much as I'd like to say you get to see the entire thing put together, you don't, because my phone ran out of storage about, I don't know, partway through one of the sleeves? Sorry, y'all. So why I chose rayon for this project is officially beyond me. I really should not have been doing that, sort of like how I shouldn't have done the dimity on my daughter's dress because it was equally as slinky and annoying. And actually, the rayon was worse. Now this fabric was purchased at Joann's about 2 years ago, so I have zero clue. Actually, I'm positive it's not available anymore. Although it is quite cute and I had bought way too much of it. But I think I had originally thought I was making a dress out of this. Maybe I'll just make a matching 1930s skirt just to round it out. But that is for another video. I did want to make sure that I showed you my attempt at a full bust adjustment as based on my 1941 Dubarry sewing book. I didn't measure anything, so I guess it didn't go that poorly. Please stand by to awkwardly stare at pattern layout. Awkwardly stare at pattern layout. Go? Yeah, this didn't really make sense to me for many reasons, but we'll get to that later. But confusion be darned, I pushed forward into the actual cutting out of things. I disagreed with quite a few things on the pattern layout, but I think that's probably because they were using 35-inch wide fabric, and mine was, I have no idea, I didn't actually measure it wide. But I did eventually get everything all laid out and cut out, for better for worse. Now on the pattern layout, piece number 3, which is the bow, was shown to be on the fold as opposed to on the grain. Whereas when we actually look at the pattern piece, it says to put it on the grain. So this was one of my slightly fatal flaws, because I actually ended up only cutting out one of the bow pieces. Although I guess it isn't so bad because I did end up wanting to stiffen the bow, so I opted to use a different fabric anyway. So less waste. Win for me, unintentionally. A clear example of how straight lines are not my forte. And once again stymied by some of the pattern pieces, the cuff for this, which says view 1, is very clearly not once I actually got into it farther, so while I had made a little adjustment to that piece as well, it didn't really matter, because I didn't end up needing it. That one goes to the short sleeve cuffed version, as opposed to the puff sleeve, which only has the lining and the outer section. So I did end up actually adjusting my sleeve lining so that I wouldn't hulk out of this lovely blouse by opening up just a little, but making sure I didn't adjust where the notches went. Alright, well, now that that was my attempt at cutting it out, I guess I probably should have ironed it first, and I didn't, so I guess I need to do that. Life lesson learned. Always iron before you pin and cut, because this is atrocious. I guess I thought I had enough room. I guess it was flat enough in my brain that, oh yeah, I don't need to iron it, it's fine. Nope. Not fine. Not fine even a little. So after a quick press and then a disastrous realization of just how poorly I had done on this, I decided to try and fix it. Emphasis on try. So after my disastrous attempt at trying to shore up these lines, we're just gonna sew it. It's fine. And this right here is why I procrastinated 3 days before attempting to put this together. Darts. This time around I opted to try and be a better sewist and used proper blue chalk and my ruler, only to be defeated quite severely in that endeavor. But oh well. Not only did the chalk not want to go straight along the rayon, but it was also pulling out my tailor's tacks along the way. What fun! And helpful. After pinning those wily pieces of rayon together, I did hop over to my machine where I attempted to sew the darts evenly, and was only vaguely successful. Gee, doesn't this sound familiar? Darts, aren't they my favorite? I did my usual method of running it off the end and tying little knots at the edges of the darts so that they didn't create any extra bulk, or so that I couldn't screw up the line any worse. And of course, shortly after darts is a crapload of hand sewing, because it tells you to turn back on the small perforations to make the button placket. Which I think I probably should have put some type of stabilizer or something to make it slightly less wiggly, but I didn't, so here we are. Once I had that done, the next instruction read, ease back shoulders to fit front, close seams as notched. Turn hem on small perforations. Again, 3 steps, 1 number. Love this. While I did opt to do the shoulders and the sides, I did not opt to do the hem until I had figured out my disastrous attempt at doing a full bust adjustment, so I saved that for a much later time frame. And I do believe the term I would use to describe my pinning technique for rayon is pin the ever-loving daylights out of it. Which unfortunately means the sewing is very slow, but it did help the wiggle around and try and not be underneath my needle factor. So at least I have that small win, friends. Now I did opt to do a quick try on in this moment, and noticing that the armholes were a little on the tight side, but there was still enough movement that I felt like I could deal with it. However, if you lined the button placket up center front for me and then pulled it out, it looks like a maternity blouse. And guess what? It's not supposed to do that. And once I had the second side on, I did really decide that it was far too wide in the stomach, but miraculously the side seams were hitting about where they were supposed to, and the waistline denotations, while they were about an inch high, weren't really that bad, so it wasn't something I was going to stress myself over. But I did avoid dealing with the billowy front for quite some time. And how best to avoid doing more darts? Yes, let's go ahead and deal with the next step, which is the bow. And why I only opted to cut out one piece of it when that clearly is in no way what it told you to do. So what I did was pulled out some of my very old combed cotton that I had found in that attic pick that I told you about. And it's not in the best shape, but it's still structurally sound even though it's not the prettiest of colors anymore. So I cut myself a backer piece out of that, which only worked so well, but we'll get to that later. Then I sewed the bow with right sides together and did my best to trim the corners before turning it inside on itself and trying to get the corners to be stick straight, which I realized in the end it actually didn't matter, but it's what I opted to do. And once I had it all turned around, I actually did opt to top stitch it, although unfortunately, while it does help hold the organza from showing too badly, it did turn it into very much a 1950s bow, as opposed to the 1930s bow that it was supposed to be. To say I had difficulty with the bow would be a gross understatement. But I got it done. Step 3. 10 o'clock. This is going well. And with the bow completed, we moved on to step number 4, which is the belt. Join notched edges of belt, lap fronts, matching triple small perforations, finish to close. Well, the triple small perforations are not noted on this piece, on the PDF, but I knew what they meant. It was basically where the fold is, because really I could have just turned it on the fold and cut it out that way. instead of having to hand lap and stitch the fronts, well, back together. So whether I just made a giant mistake or whether that was intentional, doesn't matter. It's how I did it. The only thing I didn't do was account for the fact that I had made the waist larger, so the belt is a wee bit on the small side. Now I did opt to do my sleeve lining out of whatever white cotton I had lying around. It's a slightly thicker, vaguely polished, but has a decent drape. It's not ideal because it is quite stiff, but the upside is you don't see any color bleed because my other options were light blue, terrible acetate, which I guess would have draped better, but probably would have shown blue through the very thin white fabric. And then, of course, the next step is going to be close seams as notched, on the sleeves that is, which doesn't make sense to me because you haven't run the gathering stitches yet, and as I didn't feel like doing those by hand, we opted to do that first, and then close the seams. And once I had actually closed the seams on the sleeves, I looked at my bobbin and was very concerned. And then I looked at my thread spool and was equally as concerned. So that's when I opted to just go ahead and call it a night. Hello, welcome to my car. Oh, I just found a bug. Gross. Well, so minor issue. I don't have everything I need. I ran out of thread last night. I don't have the bias tape I need. So here we are at my favorite, Joann's. I love coming here. Anyway, I know I'm lucky to have a fabric store nearby, so we're just gonna go with it. And since it's modern fabric, I don't mind buying modern things to put on it. And yes, I am wearing my liquor label dress. That is bold of you to assume that I've actually hemmed the dang thing. But here we are. I, of course, haven't hemmed it, but by golly, I have a matching mask. Because priorities in 2020. All right, let's do this. What a look, friends. What a look. All right, well, that was the thing. We did the thing, I got distracted, and I spent far too much money and time in Joann's. Now, let's get back to sewing. Mwahahaha. And as riveting as watching me pin these daggone things in place for an hour, let's just switch over now. Alright, to the sewing machine. And with that accomplished, let's go ahead and put these sleeves together. Even though I actually didn't change out the bobbin or the thread immediately, and I actually could have been fine. But oh well, that's neither here nor there. This would be the only point in my sewing endeavors where I sort of wish I had a slightly newer machine, because my good old 1960s machine doesn't have that little handy drop down where you can gently stick a sleeve or a rounded bit underneath it and not have to mangle the daggone thing to get it to go where you want it to. So this is the downside to my old sewing machine, although I love her in many other ways. And now I have finally run out of bobbin thread, with quite literal 4 inches to spare after doing the understitching on my first sleeve. So I guess now I actually have to do that bobbin. And once I had put both the sleeves together, I was desperate to avoid putting them on the blouse, so oh look, there's a binding step that I haven't done yet. Let's do that next. Yay, avoidance. And in the realms of things I haven't had to do in 10 plus years, setting a sleeve is definitely one of them. Actually, now I'm thinking that my mother set all the sleeves and all those costumes. I think I just did the long lines. So this is a first, and again, in rayon, with a lining. So while I took much longer to figure this out than I'd like to actually admit, I did eventually figure out how to do it. Is it the best way to do it? I'm still not sure, but it's the way that I opted to. Ah yes, and here I show you just how garbage I am at lining up notches. Moving on. And after putting almost every pin in my entire bucket in that sleeve, I guess I should sew it together now. Although strangely the lining I had to gather at the top, which I realized in the moment actually wasn't that terrible because otherwise it was going to be like a sad sack of sleeve. So I wanted extra poof at the top to help give it some lift because this rayon, while it flows lovely in the bodice, didn't do a whole lot of billowing in the sleeves. It did more sagging of the sleeves. So I opted to take my mistake and make it work for me. Now that the sleeves were set, I also realized that the bottom of this was going to fray quite terribly if I didn't put some type of seam binding on it, so that's what I opted to do. Found some dead stock seam binding and ran it freehand along the bottom. Again, not my best choice with rayon because it was wiggly, and there are many times that I almost ran off the edge. However, I did end up making it work, and it does help hold that hem so it's not going to fray nearly as badly. Now I did want to try it on one more time just to make sure that it really was fitting the way I wanted it to, and to make the final decision of what to do with the waistline. And if you can believe it, friends, while I did not record it, I did actually add in more darts. And they don't look terrible. Well, they're also really far apart. And I just sort of measured from the edge and took in about 1.5 inches at the bottom on either side to sort of give it that appropriate line that it looks like on the front cover without walking around and making it look like a maternity blouse. Now that we're on day, I have no idea because I've lost track. I guess I have to deal with the buttonholes. Ahem. Yeah. I don't really wanna, but I'm gonna. But of course I have to figure out which buttons to use first. Staring at my giant pile of buttons, I opted not to dig through the multi-canisters and just go with good old dead stock. So we found these cute little black buttons and went for it. Maybe trying out buttonholes on rayon, the first time you've ever actually handmade a buttonhole, is not a wise decision, friends. Try it on a cotton, or a linen, or something with more structure, so that you have more tension and ability to not completely screw it up like I did. Stephanie making things harder for herself since forever. I will say that my buttonholes only look vaguely as good as they do because of Bernadette Banner's lovely little tutorial on how to do a buttonhole. So thank you, Miss Bernadette, for that, because I read the book, I had it in front of me, I had no idea what it was trying to tell me. I messed up about 4 times before I said, screw this, put down the book, go to YouTube, and let's see what Miss Bernadette has to say about the situation. So, hats off to you, ma'am. Thank you very much. My final thoughts on the project are, while there are definitely some hiccups in this pattern and layout and wording, it is still achievable, even from a novice like me, because I've never done a 1930s pattern before, and yet here we have a completed blouse. The bow did turn out a little bit more 1950s than I had hoped, probably because I used the combed cotton instead of some other type of lightly structured instead of uber structure like the combed cotton gave me. The buttons are there, they work, and that's where we've got with that. I did also manage to line up the bottom of the blouse, which is a small miracle. I wouldn't say the hem is the most even thing on the planet, and I can see some of my hand stitches around the neckline and around other places, especially the button placket. I was not the best at hiding my stitches, but that's all things that I think on a grander scale people won't really notice. I wish I would have chosen a slightly more stiff fabric because the rayon, while in the bodice drapes nicely, the sleeves are a little droopy and sad until the wind kicks up. Then it's fun. And the darts on this are shockingly far back from any level of cusp of your boob. Again, not sure if that was intentional or just the 1930s look. I am not a dress historian, I am just here having fun, as you should when you sew. Sewing should be fun. That's my takeaway. And please don't judge me for the fact that I'm wearing jeans, because I have actually nothing that would have worked well with this blouse other than that. Well, folks, I hope you sincerely enjoyed watching me do this. I mean, it's not a complete disaster. I did manage to salvage it, but there were definitely far more bumps along the road than I would like. But hey, you learn new things every day, and apparently this one I learned a lot. You can never stop learning, so there you go. Life lessons. If you enjoyed this video, please do push that like button. And if you'd like to see more from me and my adventures in sewing and other lovely things, please feel free to push that subscribe button. Being sure to turn on the bell for post notifications so that YouTube can hopefully let you know when I post a new video. Thanks so much for watching, folks. See y'all next time. I don't know why in the middle of July I felt like lovebirds plus giant black necklace plus little Binks earrings would be appropriate with some very dark lipstick, but I think this is my mood. Oh yeah, I make choices and then I have to live with them. Why is the mic not in front of me? That's dumb. I swear I do read the books, but just sometimes they just in one ear and out the other. I'm trying this whole light behind my hair thing. Bam! I don't actually know if it's doing what I want. I would probably have to have a dimmer scene for it to be seen. Meh. But I figured I'd give it a shot. Oh, that you cannot see that. Nope. Nope. And while I didn't actually record any of the button making shenanigans, and while I didn't record any of the button sewing, buttonhole sewing, and while I didn't and while I didn't, for heaven's sake, why is this sentence so hard? And while I didn't opt to video, I found all the mosquitoes. Ah! Okay, I'm done.